Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're going to decode the modern and honestly completely wild state of our online discourse. Let's just admit it right out of the gate, okay? Logging onto the internet these days, it can feel entirely overwhelming. It's frantic, it's fast, and the energy is just absolutely off the charts. Let me ask you this. When was the last time you found yourself mindlessly scrolling only to get sucked into a completely needless argument in a comment section with someone you literally don't even know? Your heart rate goes up, your fingers start flying across the keyboard, and suddenly, boom, your whole morning is derailed, right? We've all been there. So today, we're going to look really closely at why we behave the way we do online, what exactly triggers that defensive instinct, and most importantly, how we can actually change the game to have productive conversations.
Because, let's be honest, the internet today, it feels way less like a quiet, organized library where we go to politely exchange ideas. Think of a physical library for a second. You've got the hushed whispers, the smell of old paper, the slow, methodical process of pulling a book off a shelf to digest a brand new thought. Well, the modern digital world is nothing like that. It feels entirely like a loud, sweaty, packed arena. You open an app, and suddenly you're standing in the middle of a massive stadium with tens of thousands of people, and everyone is yelling at the exact same time. The sheer volume of opinions, reactions, and hot takes, it's absolutely deafening.
Just picture this digital crowd. It's not a crowd of people in the traditional sense. It's this overwhelming blur of glowing avatars, massive speech bubbles, and flying exclamation points just zipping past your head. It's pure noise, chaos, shouting, reacting, and worst of all, reacting to the reacting. You can post a completely innocent thought, right? Maybe a simple little post about a movie you enjoyed over the weekend, and then within an hour, it is somehow devolved into a 500-comment war where total strangers are deeply offended by your choice of cinema. It escalates in an instant, turning casual thoughts into a massive spectacle. Section 1. The Internet Arena. Let's look at this shift in communication. Okay, let's dive right into this and take a step back. Because to really understand this intense arena we find ourselves in, we have to look at how our communication mediums have drastically changed in a relatively short amount of time. Think back. 20 years ago, words largely stayed quietly exactly where they were printed. They lived in muted colors on the dusty pages of a closed book or a Sunday newspaper. You consumed them at your own pace. Today? Oh, words have been weaponized. We're looking at a reality where glowing smartphones are firing off tweets, blogs, forums, and hashtags like laser beams. Almost every single sentence you read or write online has been turned into a potential battleground. Take a casual blog post about, say, a recipe or a morning routine. 20 years ago, someone might read it, maybe try the recipe and move on. Today, that same post is picked apart line by line, scrubbed for hidden meanings, and debated in forums for days on end. It's an environment primed for combat.
Section 2, our primal instinct and the urge to shout. So you gotta wonder, how did a technological tool designed to connect us turn into a battlefield? Well, it really comes down to human psychology. The internet gave us a global voice, but it completely turbocharged our most primary ancient instinct, the instinct to shout. If you picture a modern person holding a smartphone and morph them backwards in time, you'd basically find an ancient human holding a megaphone. Disagreement has been a human trait since the dawn of time, sure, but the internet has handed that trait a massive PA system. Why do we do this? We don't just argue online because we're inherently hateful. It's actually because we are literally wired for it in our brains. It's this concept called disagreement motivation. Psychologically, when we agree with someone, that agreement usually transforms into silence. You read a post you like, you nod quietly, maybe hit the like button, and you move on. Silence feels perfectly fine when we're in harmony. But disagreement? Disagreement demands action. When we encounter an opposing view, our brain actually perceives it as a slight. It's a challenge that needs addressing right now. It highly motivates us to jump up, point aggressively, and engage. Because staying silent in the face of disagreement, that feels incredibly like losing.
This need to argue back is deeply, inextricably tied to raw survival instincts. When we're challenged, we instinctively build a glass bridge of communication to reach the other person, not to connect with them, but to conquer them. It's a primal drive to prove you're the runner pushing past the competitors on the track, to prove that you are sharper, you are louder, and you are faster than the person on the other side of the screen. But walking this glass bridge with heavy, aggressive footsteps is a really dangerous trap. As disagreement increases to prove dominance, anger thrives. And when anger takes over, empathy completely disappears. We stop seeing the other person as a human being and start seeing them as an obstacle to be destroyed.
Under the weight of that anger and complete lack of empathy, the fragile glass bridge connecting the two people entirely shatters, sending the conversation plummeting right into the void. Section 3. The belief trap. When communication completely breaks down. Which brings us to a critical breakdown. Once that glass bridge of communication shatters and anger becomes the default baseline tone of a digital space, true communication is completely dead. In this environment of anger and survival, we fall into the illusion of belief. When the stadium noise gets way too loud and triggers our survival instincts, we desperately look for immediate safety. We end up retreating into echo chambers and hugging tightly to abstract, warped realities just because they feel secure. We cling to these beliefs even when they stray wildly far from actual truth, often pulling our facts from distorted mirrors, reflecting fake news or sources that just aren't credible at all. Why do we do this? Because letting go of that belief means admitting defeat in the arena. We defend the warped reality, no matter how illogical, just to win the argument and protect our fragile sense of certainty.
So, the crucial point is this. If we are neurologically and psychologically wired to disagree, and if doing so in this massive digital stadium so easily leads to anger and warped realities, how do we actually do this without completely destroying the conversation? Let's take a deep breath, let's step away from the noise for a sec, and let's look at the solution.
Section 4. The Ladder of Disagreement. The stages of an argument. We have to learn the actual stages of an argument. And to do this, we're going to use Paul Graham's famous hierarchy, the Ladder of Disagreement. It's basically the ultimate framework for navigating this online chaos. Think of this as a literal staircase we have to climb out of the stadium. But before we take a single step up that ladder, we need to establish the baseline, the golden rules of productive engagement. Number 1, don't dodge the message. Actually engage with what is being said. And number 2, don't shoot the messenger. Keep the focus on the idea, not the person presenting it. Dodging the message and attacking the messenger are our default human responses because of that primal instinct we talked about earlier. When we feel threatened by an idea, our ancient brain tells us to attack the source to neutralize the threat quickly. Overcoming that requires conscious effort to put the ego aside and focus on the actual concepts being presented.
All right, let's look at the bottom of the ladder. This is the wide, incredibly common base of the disagreement pyramid, where most internet arguments get instantly trapped. Step 1 is name-calling. We see this constantly, right? Instead of arguing a point about a new city policy, someone just calls the original poster an idiot or a hack. It requires literally zero intellectual effort. Step 2 is tone criticism. This is when you attack how someone said something, completely ignoring what they actually said. For example, responding to a well-researched article by saying, well, you just sound too angry and arrogant, so you must be wrong. You haven't actually addressed their data. You've just complained about their delivery. And step 3 is simple contradiction. This is just stating the opposing case with little to no backing. If someone says, I believe electric cars are the future of transportation, a simple contradiction is just replying, no, they aren't. There's no supporting evidence, no reasoning, just a flat refusal. If you're operating anywhere in these bottom 3 steps, you aren't debating. You are just adding more useless noise to the stadium.
But if you're willing to put in the effort, you can climb out of the noise. And climbing the ladder requires real work. Step 4 brings us to counter-arguments. This is a massive leap forward. This is where you actually start bringing real, credible evidence to back up your contradiction. Going back to the electric car example, a counter-argument would be, actually, traditional vehicles might still have a role because of current battery recycling limitations. And here's a recent environmental study detailing those specific limitations. See? You're engaging with the topic and bringing facts to the table. And finally, at the very peak, we have step 5, refuting the central point. This is where you identify the core foundational premise of the other person's argument, not a minor detail, but the main pillar, and you dismantle it with direct evidence and logic. These upper stages are rare, they're difficult, but they're the only stages that actually elevate the conversation and lead to mutual understanding.
Section 5. Aiming higher. Reaching the summit. I want to focus completely on this peak for a moment. Refuting the central point is the absolute summit of human disagreement. Reaching the top of these stairs and looking through that glowing telescope of clear understanding is what we should all be aiming for. But why is it so incredibly rare to see this online? Because the summit demands 3 things that are incredibly hard to muster when you're surrounded by chaos. First, it demands deep thought to process complex ideas. Second, it demands rigorous effort to find actual facts instead of just relying on gut reactions. And most importantly, it demands empathy. Empathy in an argument doesn't mean you agree with the other person. It means you understand their central point so deeply and so accurately that you could summarize their argument back to them, and they would say, yes, that is exactly what I mean. It forces us to abandon our primal, megaphone-wielding anger, to truly listen and to address the core issue with real respect and solid evidence. Whenever you feel that heart-pounding urge to jump into the fray, remember that this chaotic, deafening internet stadium is ultimately just a tiny app on a piece of glass and metal in your hand. You have the total power to just put the phone down, smile, and look up. If you do choose to engage, remember the ladder. You don't have to shout. You just have to aim higher. Which leaves us with this final thought for you to take away from today's explainer. The next time you open an app and step back into that glowing, chaotic internet arena, are you going to let your primal instincts keep you trapped at the bottom, shouting into the void? Or will you put in the effort, the thought, and the empathy required to climb to the summit? The choice is entirely yours.